Imagine yourself back in the 70s living the daily routine of a teenager. You were going to the roller discos on Friday evenings, throwing home parties with your roommate, and kissing your crush on the Japanese motorbike. If you want to feel the sparkling atmosphere of the 1970s Friday nights, just keep up watching. Number 1. Visiting roller discos. Let's rewind to the 70s when disco fever swept the nation and Friday nights sparkled with excitement. Then, something magical happened. Roller skates hit the dance floor. Imagine it. Dancers who were wearing roller skates? Bodies swaying to the beat, wheels spinning beneath their feet. But back then, it was just how they rolled. And with every spin, every twist, they left their worries behind, their bodies moving to the rhythm of the night. Number 2. Renting a TV set. It's hard to imagine now, but back in the 70s, the black and white TV set was something wonderful. Those days when they were watching TV sets on Friday nights were wonderful for both adults and kids. It was too expensive to buy a TV set, and only the richest families could afford it. All the others just rented the old-fashioned gadgets and put them in their sitting rooms as the most honorable place. The image on the screen was slurred. Still, it was like a miracle for all family members and even their neighbors. Number 3. Playing electronic games. It may seem to you that electronic and video games always existed, but in the 1970s, that was the first time they appeared on the market. No need to say that the first video games gathered people together. On Friday nights, both adults and kids arranged home tournaments. The air was soaked with that electronic excitement. The popular at that time games like Computer Space, Lunar Lander, and Zork stole the spotlight. The great atmosphere of joy and friendly competition made the nights emotional and interesting. Number 4. Football game watching. Back in the 1970s, high school football games were the highlight of the week, drawing entire communities together. The football pitch was a stage where athletic boys showcased their skills, dreams of becoming professional players swirling in their heads. And let's not forget about the girls. Those with a knack for pep and spirit became the beloved cheerleaders, adding an extra dose of energy to the audience. It was more than just a game. It was a celebration of community, a chance to forge connections that would last a lifetime. Number 5. Visiting the sock hop. The sock hop was the dancing event, which started immediately after the football games on Friday nights. The name sock hop originated from the necessity of taking off one's shoes to prevent scuffing the polished gym floor, leading everyone to groove around in their socks. That was the time for beautiful girls of the 1970s to put on their mini skirts or bell bottoms and dance with the high school sports stars. Number 6. Mall spending tour. Going to the mall for many modern people was just a part of daily routine. But back in the 1970s, when such giants as Landover Mall and Macy's were just appearing on the market, going there on Friday night was one of the best entertainments for young people. The visit to the mall was not just the act of getting some food or drinks, it was a cultural event. The time seemed to stand in the mall, and the visitors were soaking in that atmosphere of luxury and stability. Number 7. Arranging bowling tournaments. Bowling alleys were like community hubs in the 70s, the places where friends and families gathered to knock down pins and share laughs. The sound of crashing pins, the smell of freshly oiled lanes, and the excitement of a perfect strike made every visit to the bowling alley a memorable experience. Plus, who could resist those stylish bowling shoes? Number 8. Visiting the cinema. The new movies were released every few months in the 1970s, but it took 1 to 2 years for them to be broadcast on TV. Do you understand now why a visit to the cinema on Friday night was so popular? Back in the 1970s, going to the movie theaters was a big deal. At that time, Spielberg has just released Jaws. It was followed by Star Wars, Superman, and Rocky. Number 9. Dining at a steak place. In the 1970s, steakhouses were the places to relax and get a satisfying meal on a Friday night. Picture yourself walking into a dimly lit restaurant, the scent of sizzling meat filling the air, and the sound of sizzling steaks on the grill. It was the perfect way to treat yourself after a long week, indulging in a delicious dinner and maybe even a cocktail or two. By the way, the price of such a dinner was just $4. Number 10. Pub stand-up visit. Beginning as a form of amusement in the 1950s, stand-up comedy evolved into a legitimate profession for numerous individuals by the 1970s. It gained widespread popularity in the USA, Great Britain, and beyond during that era. Comedians took the stage in pubs, sharing witty narratives about class disparities, science, politics, and many other subjects, much of it comprised of dark humor. Just imagine yourself at the pub, beer in hand, laughing, ringing as Lenny Bruce, George Carlin, or Richard Pryor spun their comedic tales. Number 11. Riding a motorbike. The cars were of low quality at that time. They were fragile, a mere glance could cause them to break down. Additionally, they were small in size and emitted thin, tinny sounds. That's why the brave young men drove not cars, but motorbikes. Having a Japanese motorbike, like Honda, made you the king of the Friday night. By the late 70s, almost everyone cruising on motorcycles was riding a Japanese model. Some of these amazing motorbikes are still chugging along today, with no oil leaks, keeping the spirit of those nostalgic days alive. Number 12. Drive-in theater visits. The magic of watching movies under the open sky at drive-in theaters was one of the most favorite entertainments on Friday nights in the 1970s. Couples cozied up in their cars, surrounded by the warm glow of the big screen. The night air was filled with laughter and the smell of popcorn as everyone settled in for a cinematic adventure. Number 13. Visiting a library. For college students, heading to the library after a long week was a common Friday night ritual in 1970. Without the luxury of the internet, laptops, or smartphones, they relied on manual research to gather information for their papers, coursework, or reports. Writing by hand and scouring the library shelves for the necessary resources, Friday nights became a time of focus and determination. It wasn't just about leisure, it was about investing in their education and future. Looking back, there's a certain charm to those nights spent in the quiet corners of the library, the smell of old books filling the air, and the satisfaction of finding just the right piece of information. Number 14. Family brownie baking. In the 1970s, there was something special about gathering in the kitchen with family on a Friday night to whip up a batch of homemade brownies. It wasn't just about satisfying your sweet tooth, it was about coming together, sharing stories from the week, and bonding over the simple pleasure of baking. For the working woman juggling multiple responsibilities, starting from work and ending with motherhood and romantic love, it was a precious way to gather all her family members at the table and eat that old-fashioned dessert. Brownie with its rich chocolate flavor and soft texture was a Friday night good choice. Number 15. Arranging pool tournaments. In the early 1970s, Rod Stewart released the song Maggie May, where he wrote about a boy earning his living by playing pool. Back then, young folks could get a steady income from the game. In dimly lit pubs and clubs across USA and Europe, small tables hosted high-stakes tournaments. Club teams clashed and patrons organized matches, with money changing hands freely. Prize money wasn't much, but the taste of victory was priceless. It was a pre-internet era where Friday nights meant pool battles and seeking out new opponents in distant cities. Number 16. Throwing a home party. Throwing a big party with the roommate and other friends on Friday night was one of the best ways to relax and have fun in the 1970s. To make the rent cheaper, young people resided with roommates. Very often the roommates became friends and kept that connection during their whole life. Big home parties on Friday nights were the things that inspired them in their adult life. Those Friday night memories remain dear, shining brightly in the tapestry of their past. Number 17. Car music retreat. One of the most romantic ideas on Friday nights for young people who owned cars was driving to a secluded spot where the only sound was the music in the car. Back then, it was the ultimate form of entertainment. They'd hit the road with friends or that special someone seeking out the perfect spot from the city lights. Once found, they'd park, crank up the radio, and let the music fill the air, surrounded by laughter and shared stories. They'd lost track of time under the stars. Number 18. Anticipating phone call. In the 1970s, waiting for a promised phone call on Friday night was a typical ritual. With no cell phones, people had to stay close to the landline, eagerly anticipating the phone's ring. Long-distance calls were a luxury, often filled with static and costing a pretty penny. Distant communication mainly relied on handwritten letters sent via snail mail, with postage stamps costing less than 10 cents. Vacationers would send postcards for just 3 cents, capturing memories to share with loved ones back home. In a world without email, the anticipation of a phone call or the arrival of a handwritten letter held a special charm, connecting people across distances and filling Friday nights with hopeful expectations. Number 19. Friday Tarot Session. Stephen King's Children of the Corn was released in 1977. That famous story about farmtown children who worshipped a demon caused interest in all kinds of magic rituals. That's why spending Friday night taking a tarot reading became the typical way to entertain many people in the USA and other countries. That doesn't mean people in the 1970s believed in that ritual, but they enjoyed that atmosphere of magic and privacy while interpreting what tarot cards said. Oh, how many interesting stories were shared during such long Friday family evenings, deepening the bonds of friendship and fostering a sense of connection to the mystical forces at play. Number 20. Relaxing at a concert. The 1970s is still considered as the best decade of music. The artificial sound hasn't been invented yet, and the audience could enjoy really strong voices and natural musical instruments at the Friday night concert shows. Many bright music names appeared at that time, including the Jackson 5, Led Zeppelin, David Bowie, etc. In the 1970s, such genres as rock, punk, and disco occupied the stage. One of the best ideas to spend the Friday night was visiting one of such concerts and enjoying the great music vibrations there. 1970s Friday nights are gone. Enjoyed 20 Friday night things to do? Which would you do today? Comment below. Bye!